I'm so happy you're here. I'm really I can't believe that there's a reality in which you're here on my podcast today. The 18-year-old version of me would find this extremely surreal. So, Jewel, welcome to the show. Thank you for making the time to come on.
Well, thank you for having me.
You're so beautiful. You are like music. Every part of you is music. Just your energy is music. And then you make really beautiful music too. And we've all had the real pleasure of listening to you tell stories and share your heart and be so vulnerable. And it would be so cool to hear a little bit about who you were before you made that music that we all came to know you for. And I know you've told that story. I've heard some of that story over the years, but would you take us back a little bit to what was the moment in the journey where you realized that this was your work in the world, that you were going to take from the lessons and take from the quest you had been on, some of these treasures, and use your voice to share these jewels, no pun intended. Tell us about that part of the journey where you started on this mission.
I don't think I ever really knew it would be music till a lot later. For me, I was actually much more interested in patterns. And one of the main things I was interested in was the pattern of pain. I'm dyslexic. And so the way I see is really visual, and I'm always looking for patterns. But the patterns I see don't always make sense. For instance, learning to read was hard for me because I saw the white on the page. I couldn't see the black. And so if you blur your eyes, you might see all the squiggly lines that go between words from top to bottom. That's what I saw, were these funny patterns. And I was trying to make sense of these funny patterns. I wasn't trying to make sense of the type. And so it kind of just shows you how my brain works. One of the most interesting patterns for me when I was young was pain, because it was the most salient thing in my life. My mom left when I was 8. My dad began being abusive, began drinking, smoking at the age of 8 when he took over raising us. And I started singing in bars with my dad. We did it as a blue collar job. We sang cover songs for 5 hours, lumberjack joints, fisherman haunts, nothing very glamorous. But I watched people and I realized that I was seeing the pattern of pain. Everybody was in pain and everybody was dealing with pain in a different way. And some people were drinking and some people were raging and getting these brawls. But everybody at the end of the day was dealing with the same thing I was dealing with, pain. And it made me wonder, why aren't we taught what to do with pain? Everybody has pain. So why aren't we taught what to do with it? And the great thing about bars is you have a front row seat to people and how they deal with them. And what I saw was sort of this picture in my head. I think I just learned about oysters at the time and how they take sand and make it into a pearl. What I was seeing was people had pain and they would layer it. Instead of making something beautiful, they would cover it in now what I would call coping mechanisms. I didn't know the word at the time, but it looked like a mountain. And they covered it with all these layers of things to avoid the pain. And they still had the pain. And then they layered on all these other things that ended up being painful too. And I remembered making a note saying, you can't outrun pain. So that was interesting to know. And then I learned about the buffalo, and that the buffalo is the only animal that moves toward the heart of a storm because the quickest way is through. And I remember thinking, be the buffalo, move toward the pain, move toward the uncomfortable thing. And what helped me do that was writing. Writing helped me get closer to it, helped me get curious about it. And I noticed when I did that, I felt better. And so writing for me, it started with poetry, just started off as medicine. It was my way of trying to make a pearl instead of a mountain of pain. And I also, later I moved out at 15. I knew statistically kids end up repeating the cycle. I didn't want to be a statistic, but what did I have to cling to think that my life could work out better if I moved out? It was very dangerous. I was very clear-eyed about how dangerous it was to move out at that age. So I began really studying it, again, using writing, using words, trying to come closer to the thing to understand it. And I had been reading some philosophy at the time and came across the concept of nature versus nurture and wondered if my pain had thwarted my ability to know my true nature. Did it change me? Did it alter me? How would I get to know my nature? And so I sort of set off on this ambition to learn what I called emotional English. I realized as much as I had a genetic inheritance that gave me a predisposition to diabetes or heart disease, I had an emotional inheritance that gave me a predisposition to abuse and addiction. And so I had to learn a new emotional language. And so cue writing again, maybe writing could help me learn a new way of understanding a pattern. How do you learn a new pattern emotionally? And that's really what set me off. And music was my own personal, I don't know, note taking. It's what calmed my anxiety at night. That's why I wrote Angel Standing By, was because I was alone and I was afraid. And singing that song, I sang it as if it was somebody singing it to me to give myself the comfort I needed. Who Will Save Your Soul was about how do I become accountable for my own happiness? Who will save me if I won't save myself? Am I coming for myself? And so as I began to develop, now it's actually an entire curriculum, these behavioral tools, I was writing at the same time music. And both, oddly, are the two most important things in my life.
Every word, every single word, everything is vibration. Whether you're actually playing music or you're speaking, it's resonance. And the way that you allow such beautiful, coherent, like you're so available for what's really so. And so as you share, all those truths in other people start to resonate, start to light up. And that's such a gift that you give. And I remember first hearing your record, I must have been like in college, and thinking and feeling more so than thinking, this person is such a vehicle for me to get close to myself, because where she's willing to go, the vulnerability in her voice, the truth of witnessing what she's willing to witness in herself, it just pulls me right to sitting beside myself and looking at the river. And it was just like, it's exquisite, because it says so much about you and how much of a Halley's Comet you are, because so many people make all kinds of music, but it's not necessarily that kind of a vehicle. And it takes so much courage. But you listen to the story you just told, that story is all courage. It's amazing. You must feel it, that other people are having that capacity to access things from what you're putting out there. And that must feel so beautiful, that you can be helping administer that medicine.
I do think of music as medicine. And
It is.
the neat thing about it to me, especially when I'm on stage live, is the music is the medicine. It's not that I'm a doctor. It's that you try to, or I have striven to be in my life a good conduit, a good vehicle,
Yeah.
to empty myself out, to be as transparent as I can. And I think of myself as the vase, and I'm not the flowers, the music or the spirit that moves through the music. And it's so personal, because some people, only you know where your pain is. I don't know where your pain is, but the music does. And it's an incredible thing to be on stage and to know some people are touched here for their pain and some people are touched here. And it's between them and the music. And it feels almost holy. Again, I don't take it personal at all. It's just an honor to be a part of it.
Yeah, totally. It's so clear. All of that is so clear in the grace and humility in which you show up. And what you shared about the page, the white space versus the black, it's like you are Willy Wonka. Like the way you described it, what I love about it is, some people a friend of mine was just telling me she had a psilocybin journey. Another friend of mine was telling me, oh, you should try this. I've never done it. She's like, I just did this DMT thing. And I was like, what was that? And she's like, all of a sudden I could see reality in these different dimensions. And when you were just describing the way you were reading a page, I said, oh my gosh, like no wonder all these creative explosions have come through you, because you're not seeing reality in this very linear 3D way. You're seeing all these other colors and textures And I wonder what you think about that, because look at your life right now. Look at the life that you've allowed into your experience and that you've helped design. For some people growing up where you grew up, they would say that's not even it's not even in the realm of what's possible to feel different, to choose different, to make something, to connect with people, to do any of the things you've done. So what do you think about people who feel very locked into seeing things a certain way, and the things that they're seeing make them feel very stuck and small? And what do you see that might also be available if we change where we're putting our attention?
I was really lucky to have been adopted by Native Americans when I was 15. And one of the most beautiful things an elder ever said to me was a definition of power. The definition of power, according to him, was that power is perception. So perception is power. The more you conceive, the more powerful you are. But it isn't just enough to have an idea of power. It's even important to know, how do you enact power, right? Because we don't live in a world of thought, we live in a world of action. And so an act of power is something that benefits you and your community. This is only something I learned recently, but it's so beautiful and goes to what you're saying, that the more we can perceive, the more you can become still, quiet, listen, observe, expand your realm of thought, the more powerful you become. And then what do you do with that? We believe you should make sure that it benefits you and your community. And so I think through writing, it gave me all these different lenses I was able to look through. It gave me mouse lenses that I could look through, the minutia and tiny things, and study them up close. It allowed me to have like an eagle's view, where I would go up high and try and look at the patterns from up there. And that always really did translate. It made me powerful in my own life. And it wasn't perfect. I mean, my life has been the craziest show of insanity, but each time learning, what did I miss? What didn't I see? And then coming to terms, I think most recently, with one of the most beautiful things that, I realized a lot of my spiritual practice, my self-growth practice, was to try and improve my life. But if I'm being really honest, was a much more elegant form of trying to control life itself. Hypervigilance. If I can practice perfectly, if I can see everything perfectly, I can prevent any bad things from happening to me.
That's it.
That's not actually what we get to do, and it's not why we practice. And so this sentence, I'm writing a book right now. One of my favorite sentences in it is that we don't get to choose how life changes. We only get to choose how it changes us.
Yeah.
And so when you think of all the energy we waste, with hypervigilance, this is my favorite drug is hypervigilance. Going out, trying to predict everything that could go wrong and being super attentive to it is a complete waste of time. We have no control outside of ourselves. So instead, taking that emotional currency, going down and in and saying, how do I choose to change? Right now, in this moment, it's a choice. And you said that word earlier, and it's such a beautiful truth, because every day we wake up is a choice. Are you going to become bitter? Are you going to become snarky? Where do you give up? Where do you say you stand for resilience, but you give up in your own life because you felt challenged in some way?
That's so beautiful. And I would agree that my thing has been the hyper vigilant, over functioning, which really is just codependency and trying to please so that I can have some control in how people think and view me. And I think so many of the women who listen to the show write in about that in one way or another. And I wonder what you would say to, sometimes spirituality can become materialism too. Like you think it's spiritual, that you're talking about manifesting, but really now you're just in another version of capitalism, right? Like it's all fascinating. And then there are people who you look at their reality and say, gosh, Jewel she just told this story and I've heard pieces of it before. And she went from this to this. And how is it that I can do that? Right. And I'm curious what you have to say about that whole thing where people have dreams and they have vision boards and they say out loud why they're going to move to the big city. And then they talk about how it's not happening. And then they point to people like you and say, so what did she do to manifest that? Right? Like that whole conversation about seeing wishes fulfilled. What do you think, if anything, is our choice around having those experiences? I'm just so curious, since your life has had such a giant delta in so many ways, where you come into that conversation.
Yeah, it makes me think of a couple things. The first thing I want to address, maybe before I get to my life, is all of our self-care practices should make us more resilient and more durable, more gritty. If your self-care practices are making you more precious, something's happening. It's not a good practice. If you don't get your yoga in and you lose your shit, something's going wrong,
It's a
if
good point.
it's if it's making us less tolerant because we think a boundary means disassociating from people that disagree with us, that actually isn't spirituality. That isn't self-growth. So I just kind of want to say that, because there is a real trend right now of people sincerely wanting to invest in themselves and wanting to have healthy boundaries. But we know so little about it, sadly. It's such an atrophied skill in our society that we're doing things that actually make us more fragile and more precious and need everything to be just right, or else we become unhinged. So it's just
That is
something to think about.
That is so beautiful. And I just have to say this because I think you will love it. I saw this yesterday, that when people say I have to protect your energy, this guy was saying, what if you project good energy? Right? Like, what if you're so in coherence, you're so coming from the heart that you just cover everything with a blue, beautiful, loving embrace? Then you do really
Yeah,
have
and
to
then
be
that
so
gets
precious.
Yeah, it's so true. And then how do you also not pretend, because you're in a projection of like, it's all good and
Right.
rain? It
Right.
isn't. So, right, this is really difficult
Balance.
stuff we're talking about. And how do we navigate knowing our truth in a world that doesn't always agree with us? And how
Yeah.
does it not erase them? How does it not erase us? There's two things I think I really want to talk about. If you'll help me remember to come back to something I call the 3 boundaries, I would really appreciate it.
Okay. I'm going to write
Before I
that
do
down.
that, I want to talk about what we were talking sort of about
Yeah.
manifesting.
Yeah. Perfect.
I think that a pear is a phenomenon of a good root system. A tree doesn't focus on how do I make a pear. A tree focuses on going down and in and cracking that first radical root, spending most of its time developing a root system nobody sees. One of the very last things is it starts to come above ground and grow up. But we always go down and in first. So when we're thinking of manifesting, you can't think about the pear. Pear is a side effect. The thing is a side effect of good growth. And in our culture, we are obsessed with trying to materialize a pear, a car, a job, a perfect relationship out of thin air, and you're not thinking about your root system. And if you're not thinking about your root system, if you're not faithful, and that's the thing I want really to stick in people's minds, is what we're loyal to grows. What we dedicate ourselves to grows. And dedication is the result of giving up some of your free will, right? I'm going to make a decision. I have free will, and I'm going to decide to devote myself to something, say a root system. I want to devote myself to growing and to being a good person. And that's slow, steady, loyal, faithful work. It's a devotion. We don't do it so we get a pear. We do it because we're devoting ourselves to a process. And if you devote yourself, miracles happen. A pear is a side effect. It's a phenomenon. It's the very
Gorgeous.
last thing that happens because the tree has been so devoted to its own growth and being true to its nature. And so if you're true to your nature, if you're understanding what is excellent about me, what is unique to me, what is my genetic code, what is my seed? I might grow a pear, you might grow an orange, someone else might grow a flower. We're each different seeds. We spend so little time being curious about what kind of seed we are. and being devoted to our growth and being authentic to it, that we're trying to be something else, and we're trying to manipulate spiritual principles so that we can quote unquote manifest something that may not honestly be in alignment with who we authentically are. So that's just comparison, right? You're trying to manifest out of comparison because frankly, you just have the wants. Or because it's kind of a spiritual shortcut to doing the real work of being devoted to the slow work of growing roots. And frankly, most of us didn't have great upbringings. So we have to rethink how we root. We have to regrow ourselves. And that's slow, patient work. And you can't look at me, I'm 48. This is talking about a lifetime of work and devotion. Everything was a phenomenon of that side effect. The other thing I'll say about my life is it looked like I got a lot of change. I went from a homestead kid with no running water to a homeless kid to being wildly famous. It looks like my life changed a lot, but I can tell you I was having the exact same experience over and over and over. All I got is the scenery to change. I experienced betrayal, exhaustion, depletion, loneliness, no matter what. It was like being in a car on the same road, but I got the scenery to change outside the window. It went from Arctic to a Amazonian jungle. Looks like change, but my inner experience was the same. So clearly I was missing something. And that's what the book I'm working on is about now, is how do you go down and in and find even deeper levels so that it's not just that you have money, because that doesn't matter if you're still experiencing betrayal. It's not just that I got famous, because that doesn't matter if I'm still experiencing the same things that led to tremendous unhappiness.
It's literally mesmerizing because every word, my whole body accepts it as the truth when you're talking, and my brain goes, oh my God, I never thought of it in that way. And I'm loving that I can now see it like that. So thank you so much for sharing it that way. And you're right. How you just said that, because nobody really wants to be famous. They want what they think famous will feel like, right? Nobody really wants to have a #1 single. They want what they think it's going to feel like to have a #1 single. And so what you want is a change in state. You want a change in your vibration. You want an elevated state of being in your own skin. And that is up to so many things that have nothing to do with what happens on the outside. And at the same time, just to go to what you said, as you did that deep root system, as you started to find your alignment along the way, the world did receive and respond, right? And so things started to change around you. And I'm just curious because it's so fun for people to hear these moments as you went in, as the alignment starts to crystallize. What was a moment that you can remember where you went from having the scenery around you, doing this inner work, whether you were conscious of it or not, and then here's what happened, and you went, holy smokes, this, I just bumped into this experience where I walked into this place, and now this person wants to put me on this thing. What was that? What was one of those moments? Because I think those moments are just so exciting for people to hear, especially as a reflection of the alignment work, which is clear. I mean, listening to you for 1 second, you can hear that that's so.
Yeah, every time that I invested in my character, magic happened. And it didn't seem like it in the short term. The best example I can think of was when I was 18, I was struggling to get by. I was taking care of my mom who was sick. I was working in a computer warehouse, and my boss propositioned me. He wanted to have sex with me. And, excuse me, I needed the money so badly. And I turned him down, and I went in for my paycheck the next day, and he wouldn't give me my paycheck. I had no recourse. I went home. My landlord said we would have to move out because I was past due in my rent. And I started living in my car thinking it wouldn't last very long. I would get another job. But I had bad kidneys and I was having panic attacks. I was agoraphobic. And my life got worse. My car got stolen and I started living on the street. So, right, it looks like terrible, right? That looks like this guy ruined my life. It looks like maybe I should have just slept with the guy and just gotten my rent buddy money and sucked it up and moved on with my life. So it looks like I made and I did, it was a painful decision. Looks like it didn't pay off, It ended up being the most miraculous investment I ever made. We all think of stock markets, right? You want to put your money in a good stock that grows dividends. When I invested in my character, every time I've invested in my own humanity, it has paid dividends that are some kind of quantum math. I can't even figure out the returns that has paid off. Because while I was homeless, I started shoplifting. I realized shoplifting was going to end me up in jail. I remembered this quote, happiness doesn't depend on who you are or what you have. It depends on what you think. I couldn't tell what I was thinking, but I wanted to turn my life around by my thoughts. So I started coming up with a hack, which was your hands are the servants of your thought. Maybe if I could watch what my hands are doing, I could hack my way into what I was thinking. That caused me to stumble into mindfulness because following my hands around caused me to be mindful, right? Present, consciously present. So I started to stumble into consciously being present. I realized writing made me consciously present. And then it started leading me into pathways of change. Now, I wasn't getting out of homelessness. I just started learning how to stop shoplifting. It took me 6 months. I learned how to, at first, I'd wake up after I shoplifted. It took, it was like disassociative. Then I woke up while I was shoplifting, but I couldn't change it. Started to wake up during the urge of wanting to shoplift, but couldn't change. The very last thing was I could intervene. And then I decided to replace the behavior with writing. Instead of stealing, I would force myself to write. That led me on a discovery of realizing there's only two physiological states my body had, dilated and contracted. That exercise led me to figuring out that I could hack my way out of a contracted state, anxiety, by participating on something that made me dilate, which was gratitude. So the first time I got myself to not have a panic attack was through this process. Now, again, I'm still homeless. I'm still struggling to get by, but I just figured out how to stop panic attacks. I just figured out how to help myself with agoraphobia. I started getting happy, even though I was on the street. That type of confidence is what allowed me, when I got discovered by a label, to almost turn down a deal because I realized I could be happy anywhere. Now I'm unleverageable. I realized being authentic made me feel better. I realized being vulnerable made me feel less alone. And so again, all of a sudden, like accidentally, I ended up with a music career. I wasn't trying to get signed. I wasn't trying to become famous. I was just trying to figure out how to stop shoplifting. And I began writing more because I was replacing it for stealing. I know I went through that really, really quickly, but I've seen this happen again and again in my life. And I work in a youth foundation we founded. I've seen it work for all of our kids. When you do the right thing, magic follows. When you do the right thing that's right in your heart, even if it looks like you're, paying a price, it's going to pay a dividend eventually because you invested in your humanity.
It's so beautiful. And I know we're wrapping up for time. They're messaging me, but I did not want to cut you off, obviously. And I also want to honor that you need to go. It's so incredibly generous that you share what you share. And it comes from a place of really being in wholeness, that you're not attached to what people will think or say. And you're also clearly, that whole story was you were no longer attached. You had set yourself free. And because you were no longer attached, you just said it so well, you weren't leverageable. So you bump into all of these things because they don't make or break how you feel about yourself. So I wanted to ask you, as we were getting off, about your Not Alone challenge, but I also want to respect your time. So we can either end it right here and you can just tell people where to find you and all the new yummy things that you're pouring out. Or you can answer that last question however you want to do it. I want to be really respectful of your time.
Yeah. Yeah. So I have a youth foundation called Inspiring Children. We work with behavioral tools to help people work with suicidal ideation and anxiety. And through this work, I realized 50% of the population doesn't have access to proven tools, which is just really unacceptable to me. So we started the hashtag Not Alone Challenge to make sure that we can help get tools into everybody's hands that needs them. And what we're doing is we have all these amazing auction items, like Misha Collins from Supernatural's writing a poem for somebody, like a custom poem. The Bryan brothers, the most decorated team tennis players, are going to do a tennis match with you at the Miami Open. There's incredible packages. So if people want to look at those packages and bid on them, they can go to notalonechallenge.org. Also, on that website, you'll see a lot of free mental health tools. I don't like raising awareness. I think it's pointless. I think the time for raising awareness about mental health is long past. We have to put tools in people's hands. So there are practical, real tools that you can practice with or without therapy. You can use them with your coach or without your coach. I just want to start putting these tools in people's hands, and all the funds will go to starting to scale more tools this way.
It's so phenomenal. And I just keep using the word generous, but there is such a thing as a ripple effect, and who you are and how you show up in the world. It really is. It is medicine. It's the word I used before. I'm so grateful that you had the courage to continue to have the courage to keep doing that beautiful deep dive where you went toward it like the buffalo. Because as you took every step, you've taken so many people with you. So many people have
But
been
we have
touched.
so much more to do. I'm honored to be here. Thank you for having me today. And I look forward to more. I can't wait. I think you're going to love the book I'm working on. I can't wait to get that done and come back.
Oh my God, what a Christmas gift. I would love to have you back for sure when that book comes out, and we will help pre-sell the hell out of it. You're amazing. Thank you for being you. I'm so filled up by who you are and what you just gave us. Thank you so much.
Well,
And
thank you.
have the most beautiful holidays.
All
Thank
right.
you.
I'll talk to you later. Bye.
Okay, bye.